My name is Andre Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of Spokane Youth for Christ. I think some of you actually grabbed Christmas tags to help send our kids to camp. And we work with 11 to 19-year-old kids, marginalized youth who are living in Spokane's most under-resourced communities. So West Central, Hilliard, downtown, and out north. When I'm not doing that full time, every once in a while I get to come up here and preach as part of the teaching team, and I'm an elder here at the church. It's a joy to be here with you this morning. Last week, Brad kicked off our sermon series on Advent, and he used a phrase that I think really does work with this series. It's the phrase, familiarity breeds contempt. And I agree. Advent, Christmas, I'm going to say that's top two sermon series where, gosh, it's just so familiar. And this is kind of embarrassing, but my least favorite times of the year to preach are Christmas and Easter. It sounds terrible, but it's because it's so familiar. I know what you're thinking right now. Star, angels, baby Jesus, shepherds. All right, that's what you think we're doing. And again, familiarity breeds contempt. I call these sermon series alphabet sermon series, and here's why. You could all recite the alphabet right now, I bet, I hope. And then you get to the middle, and there's one letter in there that's really long. It's called LMNOP. It's a really long letter. And some of you actually think that's one letter. It's not. It's five. It's 5 letters. But you're so familiar with it that it just rolls off your lips, and it has really no meaning or impact. And that's the fear I think I have when it comes to teaching and preaching at Christmas. It's so familiar. So we're going to change it up. No angels, no shepherds, no baby Jesus kind of stuff today. We're going to look at what it means for God to be with us in a crowd, and does he see us? And Brad shared last week that the word Emmanuel means God with us. He does see us. So again, no infant Jesus. We're looking at Jesus as a grown man. Now, some of you are thinking instantly about the dinner scene in the movie Talladega Nights, where Will Ferrell, he starts praying, and he is fixated on baby Jesus. It's ridiculous. And everybody's frustrated with him, and his prayer's like, "Dear little baby tiny Jesus in your golden fleece diapers with your tiny little fat balled up fist." And his wife's getting mad, and finally I think Grandpa Chuck gets furious and says, "He was a grown man. He had a beard, for crying out loud." So we're going to look at grown man Jesus with a beard in our Advent series, God with us this morning, so that we can avoid the familiarity breeds contempt kind of feeling. So Advent. What does that word mean? Brad talked about Emmanuel. The word Advent means arrival. There are 2 great Advent events in the scriptures. The one is Jesus as a little baby, as an infant. And there's a second Advent event that most of us actually don't think about, but we should think about a little bit more, so it would inform the way in which we live today. And that's when Jesus returns. And I just want to let you know, he's not coming back as a little baby boy. He is riding a great white horse, and there's a sword in his mouth, and all his angels are with him, and he has a tattoo. I don't know if you know that. He does. It says Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and he is coming back. And the scriptures say that on that day, every knee will bow and tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So a very different day than when he first arrived. We're not going to talk about either one of those, but here's something that's happening technically right now. You and I are living between those 2 great events, those 2 Advent events. The birth of Christ and the return of Christ. So we're living in that. We're living in that tension. And all throughout the scriptures, especially when you look at the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there are a bunch of mini Advents where Jesus arrives. And today we're going to look at one that's very familiar. It's a really short narrative. It's only 10 verses. And I have a couple jobs today as the guest preacher. One is I really want you to enter into the context of this narrative. I really want you to see what's going on and feel it and experience it. Secondly, and more than anything, my goal for you today is that you'll fall more in love with Jesus Christ than when you first came in, and that you'll understand his love at a deeper level than ever before. Sound good? Okay, let's look at our passage of scripture. It's on your screen. It is from Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. He, that's Jesus, entered Jericho and was passing through, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich, and he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for Jesus was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So Zacchaeus hurried and came down and received Jesus joyfully. And when they saw, that is the crowd, they all grumbled, "He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to his house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." So here we have this mini Advent, this arrival of Jesus into the town of Jericho, but more specifically into the house of a guy named Zacchaeus. Interesting name. I'm sure his parents, like most parents, spent a lot of time poring over names, trying to pick the perfect name that would match their hopes for their son. And my name, Andre, is the French version of Andrew, and that means strong and manly. I nailed it, right? Nailed it. Are you laughing at me? Feels like you're laughing at me, but I'm gonna move on. His parents, they did not nail it. They didn't. The name Zacchaeus is the Greek form of the Hebrew name Zakkai, and it means clean or righteous or innocent. They didn't nail it. His name hardly fits his character or his occupation. What do we know about this guy's job? We know he's a tax collector. But more than that, it says he's the chief tax collector. Think multi-level marketing, kickbacks. He's doing it. Because everybody else that works under him is giving him a cut of the portion of the proceeds from the taxes that they're collecting. So he's a man of advanced status. He's powerful. He's privileged. Scriptures say he's rich, but he's also hated by most people. So we know his name. We know his occupation. What else do we know about this guy? Well, we know that he was of small stature. The Bible is not very PC. Already he's called him out for being rich. We're not supposed to talk about money. And then it says he's small. He's short. Some modern Bible translations, like the New Living Translation, actually say that he also owned a big diesel truck with big tires on it. You just need to look it up. Just trust me. Preachers never lie. He's short. That's the deal. He's so short that he couldn't see over the crowd that gathered to get a glimpse of Jesus. Remember, I want you to get into this scene. Can't you see Zacchaeus trying to push his way through, and they're like, "Not you, tax collector," and he just can't see Jesus. So he's going to run ahead and climb into a sycamore tree because of the crowd. The next question we would want to ask is, why is there even a crowd there to see Jesus? Jesus seems to be pretty polarizing, but actually he's pretty attractive right now in the midst of his public ministry. He's kind of become a rock star. No joke. Everybody wants to get a glimpse of him. People are wondering if he's going to do something spectacular. Ooh, maybe he'll heal somebody. He just did it. He just healed a guy that was blind. Or maybe with the power of his word, he'll calm the storms. He's done it before. Or maybe with that tender, kind voice, he'll draw kids onto his lap and he'll bless them. And so they're wondering what Jesus might do. Maybe he'll pick a fight. That'd be cool. I hope he picks a fight with the religious leaders. So there's this big crowd around Jesus, and they're hoping to get a glimpse of him because he's in their town. And so our guy, Zach, he shimmies up the sycamore tree. He's climbing, and he's going to great lengths just to get a glimpse of Jesus. In fact, when we study the word in the Greek, the verb form has a force of continual seeking. I mean, he's trying really hard just to get a glimpse of Jesus. He's pushing through the crowd. He's running up ahead. He's analyzing where Jesus will be. He's finding the tree, and he's climbing up it. Why? Why would he work so hard just to see Jesus? What would cause him to do that? I think it's because he knows he's hated. I think he knows he's a thief and a liar, a sinner. He knows it. he examines his life, and he says, I'm on to myself. I'm a mess. That can be the only thing that I can think of that would cause a man. Remember, he's basically an accountant. Now, if you're an accountant, I'm not comparing you to a tax collector. Don't overhear me. But he's doing well. He's good with numbers. He makes money, and he's well-dressed. And so I need you to see a guy in a pinstripe suit, really nice wool, wingtips, nice tie, climbing up a tree. You see him up there? That's weird, right? That's odd. If you saw a guy doing that today, you're driving back home and there's a guy up in I don't know if we have sycamore trees, but if you would say, that's weird. Why would he go to such lengths? He's actually humiliating himself. He's opening himself up to more scorn and public shame. Do you see him up there? Do you see him up in the tree? You see, he knows something that's really important for anybody who ever wants to get a glimpse of Jesus. He knows he's desperate. That's what he knows. He knows it. And every time his coworkers call out his name, Zacchaeus, he recognizes that he does not live up to his namesake. That couldn't become any clearer than when Jesus sees him up in the tree and says, Zacchaeus, come down from there. Zacchaeus. It must have felt like a hot spear going through his soul. He's not really just saying Zacchaeus. You've got to see Jesus in this crowd walking down the street, seeing a guy up there and saying, hey, righteous one, holy one, pure, innocent one. And the crowd's like, you got the wrong guy. This guy's a thief. He knows he's incorrectly named. He knows it. Let me ask you a couple questions. Why did you come here this morning? Did you come here to get a glimpse of Jesus? Did you come to hear him speak to you this morning and to speak to you with authority or maybe with tenderness? Is it perhaps that you too don't live up to the name? It's possible. Maybe last night, after your kids fell asleep, if you have kids, and it's dark and quiet, and your head hits the pillow, and you begin to analyze your life, and you realize, I don't like it because I don't like me. I'm desperate to separate myself from my past mistakes and broken relationships. Is that where you are, crying out, Jesus, do you see me? Are you here? God, are you with me? You know, Jesus doesn't stop with simply calling his name. That would have been cruel. He doesn't berate him. Instead, he says, hey, come down. I'm going to stay at your house tonight. And the tax collector, this sinner, this lost man, he is floored. He hurries down that tree and he welcomes Jesus into his house. He simply hasn't just been seen, he's been found. He's been waiting his whole life for someone to call him down out of that tree. He's been eating alone for years. I guarantee you, this guy goes home and it's an empty house. Yet another lonely holiday, yet another meal, all by myself. No one wants to be with me. And Jesus says, I do. I'm coming to your house today. Can't you see his face as Jesus sits across from him at the table? Can't you see Zacchaeus hurrying to make Jesus something which would have been common? I don't know what the equivalent of a first century quesadilla is, but he's probably like making something like that. Something quick, fast, easy, good, warm. Here, Jesus, this is for you. No one ever celebrated him. They all hated him. And the Savior of the world is sitting at his house, dining with him. Now, a lot of commentators make a huge deal about the lengths that Zacchaeus goes to get a glimpse of Jesus. I kind of did the same thing, right? I described the verb tense, and it's continual, and he worked really hard to get a glimpse of Jesus. And that is true, but I want to argue that Jesus Christ went to greater lengths to get to Zacchaeus. That's the operating mode of Christ. Jesus is always the initiator. Jesus is the one who goes to great lengths to find us and to seek us out. Jesus is the one who glances up at the tree. Jesus is the one who made the tree. Think about that. Jesus knows his name. How? It's a big city. Jesus calls him down, and then Jesus does something really strange. He invites himself over to his house. People don't do that. What if I did that to you after the service? You come up and say, oh, that was interesting. And I say, oh, thank you. I'm coming to your house in 10 minutes. My whole family, we're all coming. You would go, that's weird. You can't do that. Jesus does that. He is initiating it. He's the one who's in control. He says, I have to come to your house. It's fascinating. This is why Jesus took on flesh, so that he could come after us. He's coming after you. There's somebody in this room that's been running from Jesus. Can I give you a little bit of advice? Would you stop running? Just stop. You cannot outrun Jesus. The guy never gets tired. He doesn't. He always gets what he wants because he's God and he will catch you. So give up. Surrender. Some of you are trying even harder than Zacchaeus to get a glimpse of Jesus. You're trying moralistically. If I do this or don't do this, then Jesus will accept me. That's exhausting, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't give you acceptance with Christ. Do you know how you'll get accepted by Christ? It's by not trying anymore. It's by accepting his gracious love for you. It's by letting him dine with you. It's actually critical that he comes into your house and dines with you. You see, when Jesus goes into the house of Zacchaeus, the crowd goes bonkers. Jesus is always getting in trouble for dining with sinners, tax collectors, and prostitutes. And we think, oh, well, what's the big deal? That's pretty cool that he's open to hanging out with people not like him. And what an amazing scene. And there's more going on. You don't get criticized just for being nice. Because when Jesus enters into Zacchaeus' house, it's a statement to that crowd that he accepts Zacchaeus. And then it means that he's actually befriended Zacchaeus. But it's even more than acceptance and becoming friends. Because when Jesus goes into Zacchaeus' house, he says, I'm going to share in your sin. Jesus is actually tainting himself. Jesus is becoming sin by being in Zacchaeus' house. Do you see what's happening here? Jesus is trading places with Zacchaeus. That's what he's doing. It's very clear. The scriptures say that he who knew no sin, that's Jesus, became sin so that we might have the righteousness of God through him. Jesus, he climbs a tree. It's a form of execution, but he's on a tree, make no mistake about it. And there's a crowd there, and they have turned on him. He is no longer a rock star. He is a thief and a criminal. In their eyes, the two things that Zacchaeus was, a thief and a criminal. And they yell and they jeer, not at Zacchaeus anymore, but at Jesus, the true righteous one, pure one, the clean one, the holy one. You see, most people get that at the cross, our sin is given to Jesus. And that's true, and that's important, but it's not enough. There's more happening at the cross. And it's my fear that the church doesn't understand this concept well enough. It's known as the great exchange. Jesus, I give you my sin. I give you my filthy rags. I give you my record of shame and mistake. And what Jesus gives in return is he gives me his purity and his righteousness. I give him my filthy rags, the scriptures say. He gives me his robe of righteousness. This is really important for us to understand. It's not just that Jesus takes my sin, he actually gives me his perfect life. He gives me his robe of righteousness. And I want to encourage you, if you have Christ, You have his robe of righteousness, and you should be wearing that all the time. When you wake up, put it on. When you go out to work, clothe yourself in the righteousness of his robe. If you're married and your spouse comes home from work, put it on him or her. Go to bed in it. Be married in that robe. And when you draw your final breath, be buried in it. So that when you meet God face to face, when he sits on the great white throne, he sees that robe of righteousness. And he can declare to you, you are righteous and pure and holy. You see, the name fits for Zacchaeus now because the robe fits. He's got the right name, and he's living into it because he is a new creation. He will never be the same. We know he's not the same. How do we know this? What does he do with his finances? All the wealth that he's amassed. He says, I'm going to give it back to the poor, and if I've wronged anybody, I'm going to pay them back fourfold. Fourfold. I did 10, fourfold. Have you ever said something just because it sounded right, and you're hoping that the person says, no, you don't have to do that? This is one of those times. Hey, Jesus, if I've defrauded anybody, defrauded? I don't think that's a word. Defrauded. I'm going to pay him back 4 times, fourfold. And Jesus says, yeah, okay. You see, he was so trapped materialistically that that's the level he had to give back at to be set free. And he does it, and it produces joy in his life, joy and generosity. I don't know why, but my whole life I've worked at relatively wealthy churches and communities. Planted a church in Redmond, Microsoft executives, lots and lots of money. We're church here up on the South Hill. And I debated about going here, but I'm going here because I've started going here. I need to finish my thought. I'm wondering if there's anybody out here today who has a lack of joy tied to a lack of generosity. I'm wondering if there's anybody out here today who is materialistically in bondage and you're not living a full life. And I got to tell you, I want you to have that. I want you to have joy. And I'm wondering if there's anybody out here who knows that they've cheated somebody financially. My encouragement to you would be to make it right. Zacchaeus is one of the few people in the scriptures that is wealthy, that does the right thing. Most walk away from Jesus sad, and you never hear of him again. You don't. Make it right. Apparently there's this app called Venmo. I don't know what it is. My daughter says you should get it, but maybe you need to do that, Venmo, to somebody. Maybe it's $5, $50, 50,000. I don't know. Might be. Be set free. Because Zacchaeus, he's set free. He's asking, God, do you see me? God, do you love me? Do you see me in this crowd? And Jesus says, I'm with you, and I will set you free. It's an amazing life change that God would be with him, even in the midst of all of his brokenness, all of his sin. And he's redeemed. He walks away a new man. We're going to sing the doxology, so if you would please stand. The church has been singing that for centuries. And another tradition of the church is to receive the benediction. And actually the key word in that is receive. It's something for you. It is technically not a prayer. And it's pretty common for those who receive the benediction to lift up their hands. So if you're comfortable doing so, I'm going to encourage you to lift up your hands so that you might receive this benediction. It's not from me. It's not from Summit. It's from God, okay? It's his word for you. So receive the benediction. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you peace. Amen. Have a great week. Prayer team's up here if you need some prayer. And Zags, 10 minutes.